All right, guys, welcome to the show. Reza Riff, subscribe, rate, and review. Alan Lee is going to be missing a couple episodes due to a personal thing. So we are going to get right into it. Couple things. My stand-up special is still on iTunes. So buy that at Keith Reza Make It Happen. And book me on Cameo, www.cameo.com/Keith Reza, and I'll give you a birthday shout out and all that jazz. Comedy's starting to come back. Hopefully by the summer we'll get some dates, and everyone's staying safe. I got the hiccups, which is never good on interview, but we'll see what we can do. We have a good show tonight, great show. This is one of the first headliners I ever worked with. He's been on Comedy Central, Comics Unleashed, and he's now on this TV show Neighbors with Cedric the Entertainer and all that. Greg Wilson, or the Greg Wilson, or Greg Ramiro Wilson. He has so many names nowadays. And we'll be talking to him very shortly. If you like the show, subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcast, and give us some love. All righty. We will be right back with the Greg Wilson in a minute.
You're listening to Reza Riffs with Keith Reza and Alan Lee, right here on LA Talk Radio.
All right, cool, man. So, Reza Riffs with the Greg Wilson, or is it Greg Ramiro Wilson now?
It's Greg Ramiro Wilson now. I rebranded about, I would say like about 3 years ago, I think it was. Maybe 4.
Well,
Yeah.
man, I've only seen you once within those years, though. The Slow Comedy Festival.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So our paths used to cross a lot when I started, and then they barely crossed, the older you get. Do you find that a lot with comics?
Well, yeah, I mean, because we begin to, for me, it's because I started going out locally a lot less, and mostly just, if I was going to do, shows and be on the road, and, I was over there at the Ha-Ha if I was anywhere, and I just didn't put a lot of time into getting out locally as much as I used to. I just got old, and I got tired. It's so funny. And then, of course, the pandemic happens, and you realize, oh my God, I would love to be anywhere all the time, And so in many ways, there's like a renewed passion to be out locally again, like as much as I can.
Do you remember how when you do a bar show and you're like, this is the worst fucking gig in the world, and now with the pandemic, you're like, oh, I'd rather do the bar show?
Oh, you got celebrity. Listen, I was supposed to do one. I forgot whose it was. It was down there. I think it was in Huntington Beach. They were doing it on the beach. It was before, we had the vaccine or anything. But he was like, "It's outdoors. Don't worry. It's gonna be cool." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "How many people?" He's like, "Well, like 100." And I was like, "And are they wearing masks?" He goes, "Well, when they walk in, they have to wear a mask. But usually when they get outside, they all take them off." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I can't do it, man. I'm not gonna do this show." And I was like, but listen, if you want me to help you to find a replacement, I'll find a replacement. And I started pitching him a few names. He goes, "Oh, don't worry. I got the guy that created Last Comic Standing. He's famous for doing the Christopher Walken impression.
Jay Moore.
Jay Moore." He goes, "Oh, don't worry. I got Jay Moore." Listen, when Jay Moore is taking bar gigs, okay, that's what I'm saying. Like even the celebs, like Bill Burr, he's out. He's taking every show he can get his hands on right now. So
I think I did that show because I actually tour with Jay.
Oh, okay. So you may have done that show then. Yeah.
So you gave me work. Thanks, pal.
There you go. You're welcome, man. Yeah, I was like, I can't risk it. It's too much risk.
Yeah.
So.
Isn't it funny? Because when it first came, we were joking about the name coronavirus, thinking we were saying, oh, you get it from drinking Corona. And then it got serious 3 weeks later. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, I remember I was going to the airport to go do a gig, and me and the Uber driver like kind of laughing about how everybody was overreacting to it. It's like we got like 8 deaths in the entire United States, because this was right when this is right when the numbers were so low that Trump was making people stay on a boat in the ocean because he didn't want the numbers to go up by however many, which is just crazy to think about now. But so I was like, come on, more people die in car accidents every day. It's ridiculous. And then by the end of that trip, coming back, I was wiping down the chair with Lysol wipes and and it was like, and I had my mask on, but then like the pilot that had jumped that wasn't flying the flight, was on the flight next to me. He wasn't wearing a mask. I'm like, well, if he's not wearing a mask, am I stupid for it? And this is like between leaving for the trip and coming back for the trip. That's how fast shit changed.
But you know what's interesting is I haven't gotten the cold at all, because I think like maybe the mask, regardless if people believe it or not, I think the mask is actually a good thing, because a cold sucks. You get that.
Well, I knew we also weren't out, congregating, touching the same stuff, breathing in, all those things factored into not getting certain sicknesses. Is you certainly weren't stressing out your body by blowing and going for 6 days in a row. I mean, that's always exhaustion is what usually gives me a cold. Is I've just been doing too much for too long, and on the road, and then coming back, and then shooting a thing, and then and then by the end of 2 weeks, my body's so tired I catch a cold. It's almost my body's way of saying, okay, lay down, motherfucker. And without that, my body was just like, okay, you can't keep feeding us liquor and pizza, man. You're gonna fucking kill me. Trying to reel in that diet from the pandemic has been a real challenge.
I think it's like the COVID 75, because I think I've gained 75 pounds.
At least, dude. It's so ridiculous. I mean, there was nowhere. And this is with me trying. I was running, I was biking, but I would do it for 30 to 45 minutes, and then I was just on my ass the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So I mean, all that work would barely kept me from not getting fatter.
Yeah.
Because that was the other thing. If I ran that day, or if I rode my bike, or if I did anything, then I came home, I was like, well, all right, whiskey and pizza, I earned it. Let's go, line it up, So
what's that bike that my sisters have one? It's like a bike, and you put it inside and you ride on it, and like
the Peloton.
Do you have one of those?
No, Adam Hunter has one of those. And I was like, he's like, oh, it's so worthy, you should get it. I'm like, but don't you have to like keep paying monthly for it? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, how much? He's like, $65. I'm like, fuck that. I'm not getting your Peloton. What a fucking scam that is. It's like you keep paying for the bike. And the bike's like $4,000.
Yeah. So especially since you're not working right now, it's a scam,
Only. I'm like, no, don't forget it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to actually go ride my bike. That's what I'm going to do. I have a bike that I paid $400 for, I don't know how many years ago. And I was actually talking about that, during the Zoom shows. It doesn't really mean anything now, but during the Zoom shows, I was like, I got to tell you guys, riding your bike now is the best ever, because there's no traffic. Normally riding your bike in LA, in Los Angeles, I live mid-Wilshire, I'm right in the heart of LA. And it's like, if you ride your bike on the streets of mid-city, it's like riding an obstacle course, but you're the obstacle. And no one's trying real hard to miss you, So it's very nerve-wracking when there's full traffic, but during all those days when the streets were empty, I was just like, oh, this is the greatest. Like, I just owned the roads. It's fantastic.
Now, you mentioned Zoom shows. Did you do a lot of Zoom shows? And if so, how'd that translate to you? Like, was it easier for you?
Funny story. First Zoom show I ever do. And we just knew that this was what we needed to do and started doing it. Like, nobody really mastered it right away. Nobody put out. Now, eventually, Sammy Obeid put out a whole article about, listen, this is how you produce Zoom shows. But I mean, that was months into it at this point. And I had already done many, many Zoom shows at that point. But the first one was for Adam Hunter. Again, very good friend of mine, co-host of he's the originator and main host of MMA Roasted. And then I'm one of his co-hosts. And
he's probably the reason why you said yes to this, because I interviewed him.
Maybe. I was like, all right, Adam did it. I'm doing it. It's like, I was like, all right. Listen, if he's made his way through all these names, if he's made it down to me, I mean, who am I to turn it down? So the first one we do, it's Adam Hunter's Dime Bar show, which as a live show already kind of sucked. And then as a Zoom show, so I get in there, so I turn on the Zoom. Oh my God. And I like set up a mic that was in no way connected to anything. I wanted it to be as real a stand-up performance as possible. I was standing up. I had it set up in front of a little backdrop. At this point, I didn't buy any green. Now I've got like 2 green screens and a white screen. But at this point, nothing like that. So I'm in front of a painting with this mic, set up with a mic stand, and I'm ready to do a real show. Yeah. And okay, so he cuts to me. He goes, here we go. And I show up and first person goes right away. Oh, I didn't know I was going next. He's like, oh, please welcome Greg, the Greg Wilson or Greg. People use different, they switch back and forth depending on what they're used to. And I don't blame him. I don't blame him. It's like Coke and Coke Classic, pretty much is what happened here. And I can explain all that in a minute. But so we go to the Zoom and, okay, so I went to try and scroll right as they introduced me. I went to try and scroll over to where I could see the audience, but instead I scrolled over to speaker view. Okay. And I'm the speaker. So all I see is me and then me in the smaller box. Right. Yeah. So it's me. And what Adam didn't tell me. Okay. So the week before was the first one he'd ever done. And everybody's talking through the whole thing because nobody understands that their mics are as loud as everybody else as the speaker's mic. So second week, he decides to mute everybody but the speaker. Okay. Right. Doesn't tell us that the whole audience is muted. Okay. So I start doing now, I'm performing for me, to me, and I hear nothing else in response. And I mean, and I decided to break one of the 3 golden rules of stand-up, and I decided to open with new material because, of course, we're in this incredibly new experience, and I felt like talking about other shit seemed so stupid at that point. I felt like we had to discuss this and this only. So I'm doing all this untested stuff, and I mean, I immediately flop, sweat. I'm like, I'm dying. But then the comments are still active. So the first comment comes up, and it's like, this guy is a legend. And it says legend in all caps. I'm like, fuck yeah, I am, motherfucker. Okay. So now I get a little juice and I start doing it. And then the next comment that comes on is this guy, all caps, sucks. And I'm just like, so it is sucking. Okay. So now it's a death spiral through the next 2-3. I maybe did 90 seconds of it felt like an eternity. And I stopped and I go, you know what? I had my trepidation about how this might go, and I hate to see that I was right. Thank you guys very much. I'm Greg Romero Wilson. Good night. Yeah. And I just got off, and they're like, that was Greg. Okay. I mean, it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes. And I was like, thanks. I jump off the thing, leave meeting, fucking, and now I'm like, fuck, super, ever fucked up in. And now at this point, I'd agreed to 3 or 4 more Zoom shows. I immediately messaged all of them and was like, I'm done with Zoom shows. I will wait for the real thing. This is bullshit. Fuck this medium forever. So, and sleep all night. That angry sleep, that fuck you. Yeah. Fuck you. You're not funny. I'm fucking funny. You're not. Okay. And I woke up in the morning and I was like, you know what, Greg, this is just the next challenge. This is just the new medium. And you can't beat old guy comic who won't adapt. It's adapt or die. And you're not going to sit here and not perform for the year or so that this is going to take. At that point, I had resigned myself to a year because that's what they were saying it was going to take to develop a vaccine. Was about it. I'm like, they're like at the earliest 13 months. I'm like, okay, so set my sights. And I was like, that's too long to not perform. You have to conquer this medium too. Yeah. And so I went back to the drawing board. I retooled the act. I put the punchier stuff I knew definitely worked up front. I made the other stuff punchier, with less, pontification, and was like, okay, I'm ready to take another. And then I took a few more Zoom shows and immediately rebounded. And a lot of it was figuring out the timing with Zoom. It was like playing a big room. You either wait for the laughs or don't wait for the laughs, but there's no regular beat like a live show. And So I realized just to go half beats and just keep doing the material. And if they laugh, great. If they don't, I mean, the laughs come, but you don't want to be too laugh dependent because the timing's all fucked up in Zoom. And so I learned to conquer it, and the second show back, I did exceedingly well. And I have to say, most of the shows from that point on, I crushed.
I did one Zoom show. And I only did it because Dante's my manager, and he kind of like forced me to do it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
good manager.
Yeah, and so I did it, but I didn't do it like a regular stand-up show. I did it like I thought of it like it was a podcast. Like I'm interviewing the guests, and if the guests think they're having a good time, that's great. But I'm not gonna do any stand-up. You know what I mean? So I just kind of did it like this, and I didn't like it because I didn't know any of the fucking audiences. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, listen, you saw people just sitting on their bed looking into the computer like they had just finished masturbating, and we're just talking like it was a fucking FaceTime. Like, yeah, I'm just sitting here, not much to do, no reason to do laundry. Blah. I'm like, what is this? Can you attempt material? I believe this was still promoted as a comedy show.
Right.
So there was a lot of laziness at some point. And then I did one show and I went off and I was like, if you have to say what else ever again, then you're fucking trash. Okay. Right. You should have so much to talk about after this. There shouldn't ever be a what else. Okay. And then the next comic after me, like, I didn't know she was following me. I didn't know she was next, but you could tell she kept wanting to go, let's see what, and then finally, about halfway, she was like, fuck you, Greg. I just want to say what else. God damn it.
No.
I was like, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that was your whole thing with saying what else. But Jesus Christ, how can you not know what to say now?
Now, for the folks at home, you also teach stand-up comedy at, I believe, the Ha Ha, right?
Well, I have taught it at the Ha. I mean, the Comedy Institute. That's the school. It's thecomedyinstitute.com. And now it's all on Zoom. So, and I had actually moved on from the Ha. I was teaching out of the Space Station Casting Studio in Hollywood for the last 2 years, I think, in the before times. And that's what go right. And now I'm translating it all over on online classes as well. I mean, obviously Zoom is an online class, but I mean lessons that people can just go and watch, very cheaply and get all the information. It's my master class without having to actually, come to a live seminar, which is one of the limitations that I've had with my education. I would go to these towns and I would teach workshops when I was there doing, headlining whatever club, but that was really the only ability I had at that point to really spread the education to those communities. And now I'm going to be able to put it online, which honestly, I should have done it last year, but I was so depressed.
Right.
I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if the world continues before I put in all this effort to, put these lessons online. But now I have them and they're all, we're getting them cut and they'll be up pretty soon. And all that will be available again on the website, thecomedyinstitute.com.
Now, I had 2 questions about that. The first question, obviously, you said teaching comedy is easier online, right? With the online packages.
Right, because of the fact that you don't have to go anywhere. Nobody has to go anywhere. You just have to sit at your desk and turn on the Zoom, and we can work out the material. And the fact of the matter is whether it works in Zoom and whether it works live is still kind of the same difference as in the workshop. Because when we're doing it in the workshop, I used to say, sometimes what works in the vacuum doesn't work in the live show. And sometimes, it does, sometimes if it works in the live show, or rather if it works in the vacuum, it's definitely going to work. But there's some differential there, and that exists, whether it's a live workshop or whether it's a Zoom workshop. You tend to sometimes run into that same different, which is fine. I mean, that's why we take it and then do it live and it didn't work. Like, okay. And sometimes stuff that didn't work in the vacuum does work on the live stage. So, but it's all about working it out and trying to make sure you have lots of punchlines and that it's structured right. And, that you've thought all the way through the material and stuff like that.
Now, see, you're a different example because you've performed at theaters, comedy clubs, you've performed everywhere. For students whose goals is to do comedy clubs and then they say, oh, well, this work at a theater, what is your advice on that? Because they're 2 different beasts. You know what I mean?
Well, they are, but honestly, funny's funny. And if it works, it should continue to work. It isn't what changes is the timing. with the venue, because you go from a low ceiling compact room to an infinite ceiling broad room, so essentially it's like waiting for it to go all the way back and all the way back in. And so it essentially slows down. It makes sure, I mean, if you do it right, it actually slows down your material a lot. Yeah. And what would have been 12 minutes winds up being, 16 minutes. Because of the additional time it takes for the audience to kind of rise and fall, because it's just such a larger wave as opposed to, a burst that happens in a club. So the material doesn't change, the timing does.
And do you think like timing could also be like a curse to comedians? Because like you said, sometimes you could have like 16 minutes, but it's only 10 minutes of material. So that comic will probably think they have 20 minutes when it's really... You know what I mean? Do you think that's...
Well, I mean, I think you figure it out in the first one or two performances. You're like, okay, I don't have enough time for that. I got to squeeze in more of this or whatever. But there are a few people that start at the theater level and then come down to clubs. Yeah. They're like, oh my God, that isn't a scenario that happens.
Unless you're Barry Sobel, right?
Right. Unless you're, or your last name is Wayans.
So are you thinking about doing your own podcast too?
I do a couple of podcasts. I mean, obviously I co-host on the MMA Roasted, but I do a fantasy football podcast because I love fantasy football. Oh. And I found with podcasting, I mean, if you're trying to make it a business that makes money and all this, then that's different. But I do it for passion, that way it doesn't, yeah. It is something that bothers me tremendously. And so fantasy football, it's called Fantasy Football Harsh Reality. And that's my fantasy football podcast. Of course, most of those episodes happen during certain months of the year. Like right now, I put up nothing because I'll do like nothing's going on. Yeah, exactly. I'll probably do one this weekend because we'll have the draft. And so then I'll do like a free agency draft episode. We talk about the implications of the new players that have moved around. But that'll be about it until August when it's time to break down the drafts.
Now, I don't know a lot about football, but my favorite player is Ryan Fitzpatrick. What is your fantasy advice on him? Do you think I should draft him?
Didn't he just move to the Jets? I think he just moved up to the is that where he went?
Washington. He played for the
Jets. To Washington. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about Fitzpatrick, the occasional Fitz magic is, you never want to draft him as your quarterback one. He's somebody you get when your quarterback gets injured.
Right.
Or he's on a bye week and you need somebody, and that's if he's playing. And, Washington, I think is made it clear they're going to try and have a quarterback competition. They're going to try and draft somebody somewhere, not one of these top first round guys, but I think they're going to draft a couple of guys, try and looking for that Brady magic in the 4th through 6th rounds. And, I just don't think that they're counting on Fitzpatrick to be probably to be the starter, like exactly what Miami just did with him and Tua. I think Washington's going to be looking to kind of do that exact same thing. And, if they get a receiver and they get, they have a real playmaker, then they could really, because they have the one guy that's phenomenal. What's in Washington?
What's Terry McLaurin.
Yeah. McLaurin, Scary Terry. Yeah. That's right. Terry McLaurin. So they have some tools. The running back Gibson, he turned into down the stretch. He flashed some greatness down the stretch. He had a couple of good games. So if you can get someone in there, but overall, I think he's not really somebody you worry about in terms of fantasy football. He's kind of an afterthought.
Well, there goes my pick.
Sorry, buddy.
But you're also doing a TV shows. You're on the neighborhood right now.
The neighborhood, right? The neighborhood. Yeah. I have a small recurring role. I've done 2 episodes with them, and they seem to really like me over there. And every time I'm there, they're like, "We're gonna bring you back. We love you. Can't wait to have you back." So, I got basically like 1 episode a season. But it's a great show, and it's another notch in the resume. So,
what's it like acting with other stand-up comedians besides like working with them at a club? Because Cedric's a great stand-up, but you're acting with him.
I'll tell you this. The problem for me is that generally speaking, I'm a better actor than most comedians. Right. And so watching them kind of struggle in ways that I don't struggle, I realize how hard the transition can be, from stand-up to acting. But to work with legends, like Cedric and George Lopez. You don't give them notes.
Yeah.
You just sit there and you appreciate what they do, and that's the thing is, and they're amazing in that. There's certain ways that it's more difficult for them than it is for me. When they do get it, it's magic. I mean, there's a reason they're where they are, and they're spectacular at it, and and so the final product, you're like, well, yeah, that's why you're here, because you're a fucking star and you're great at this and you're fucking funny as shit. So for me, it was an absolute blast, and I couldn't have enjoyed it more being around those two guys. I never mentioned that I was a comedian to them. I don't know if they knew.
I'm sure they did.
I think they did too.
All comedians, they kind of know each other just by a name. You know what I mean?
And I've done shows with Cedric and I've done shows with George, but they don't always act like they remember that they did a show with you. So and it wasn't something I want to be like, hey, remember we did that show together? I was like, listen, we're actors on this set today, and I'm just going to sit here and watch you two geniuses go off, and they did, and they were spectacular.
I think like with comedy, although we don't always run into each other, people even if you don't remember the jokes or the humor, you'll always remember the name. So like if you say, oh, do you know who Keith Reza is? You'll be like, oh yeah, I know him. I know who Greg Wilson is. So I think they'll know no matter what, and then that was the second question I had for you. Why do you think comedians are so butthurt about being called not funny? Because I've been called not funny and I've been butthurt before about that. You know what I mean? Because
you're pouring your heart and soul into being funny.
Yeah.
And then if they say you're not funny, well then, it fucking hurts. That's why, because it fucking hurts. You're but I am. This is good. It's so funny, but this guy Chris Simpson, who's a comic, he always loves to bring up this one show that we had in El Monte where I don't know what happened, man. This audience, they were an extremely Latino audience. Right. I feel like they could sense that I didn't speak Spanish, and I swear to God, and they were just like, "Get this fuck ass Latino off our stage!" Like they just hated me, and just what? And I was like, "What the fuck is that? This is proven material. This is 99.9%ers, and this is the show that gives it that 0.1 that it's not. You motherfuckers." So they just, and he loves to bring that up. He loves not like the night in El Monte. Shut the fuck up. It's one show, but
is he still doing comedy? I haven't seen him in 4 years either.
Yeah, but he's, that's the thing. You're down in Huntington and he's out in the Inland Empire. And it's one of those things, when you're in a certain area, you see certain people a lot and other people never,
I remember I did a show with him and he was selling DVDs after a show. He's like, all proceeds go to my mother. And he made maybe $300. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. He's like, yeah, my mom died 3 years ago. I was like, yeah. I was like, Jesus Christ.
Wow. I hope everyone heard that. Chris Simpson, he did that. That was him. Dude, that's so funny. I should sell shirts that are for breast cancer awareness. And then they'll be like, what? I take this money, I go to a strip club, and I am so aware of breast cancer.
I want to respect your time, Greg, so I only have 3 more questions. This one you probably get a lot, but I think she's one of the hottest girls in the world. What was Paris Hilton like?
Here's the thing, and it's so funny because she talks about it in her little documentary that she put out about her life, about how there are 2 Parises. And I used to say that all the time. I'm like, listen, guys, there's 2 different Parises. Yeah. There's regular Paris, who actually has a fairly deep voice. And then there's the camera's on, which was somebody else entirely. And that person only existed when the cameras were on, or it was an event that she had to be that way, that she felt like she had to be that way, I guess. And so, but I really knew the other Paris, and that Paris was so nice and funny and loved my comedy. She used to come before, everything that blew her up and the movie we did together and all that, she used to come to my shows in New York. And we would, she would come to my shows in New York. I did this huge show at the Supper Club, and we did it like twice at Madison Square Garden and stuff. And so she would come, and she was one of the big celebrity guests, and we'd go to the after parties and hang out and stuff, and occasionally go to dinner. And so I was around her a good little bit in New York, and she was super awesome. She was always really nice to me. And then when I got cast in a movie, she was like, "Oh my God, Greg!" And when they told me it was you, I was so excited, And we had a great time doing the Hottie and the Naughty. And so she was just nothing but an absolute sweetheart. Couldn't have been nicer person to be around as far as my interaction with her ever went. I've heard stories of whatever after party stuff where she may have, but I wasn't there. I don't know. My experience with her was nothing but really, she was always really, really cool.
See, that's good to hear. And then, what's your favorite place to go to on the road? Because I know you're huge in Texas, like huge.
I wouldn't say I'm huge. There's certain markets in Texas that they like me a lot. But when I'm in Dallas, what do you mean favorite? Like which cities or?
Yeah. What's your favorite? Where every year you're like, oh great, I love this place. Like no matter what, I know the shows are going to be good, the audience are going to be good. I don't have to stress about the shows or numbers, you know what I mean? I could just
that's everywhere I go. Because the places I work, I tend to work pretty regularly, and I've got good, I build up pretty good audiences in those towns. And so, the El Paso comic strip surprisingly has always been fantastic to me, and I've always had fantastic shows there. There's another place where I always had great shows is Laughs in Tucson. I just have monstrous shows when I'm there. They're almost always completely sold out, and I just straight murder those shows. And also in Las Vegas, I just have a really magnificent time when I'm in Vegas, and those shows usually go great. And I used to do a club. It's not open anymore, called the Comedy Spot in Phoenix. Now I do the Stir Crazy, and the Stir Crazy is I have great shows at Stir Crazy, great relationship there. Love to see those crowds. But when I was at the Comedy Spot, I really had some very epic. Those were very, very. It was a small room, really
Sean
compact.
Dillon, right?
Sean Dillon, and it was like honestly, it felt kind of like doing the Cellar in New York. Just this small, tight, low ceiling, dark room, and the laughs really. It would really. Now I didn't. The lineup was not like the Comedy Cellar in New York. That was what I hated. Was he would fill it with all these, these noobs that would basically kind of ruin it. But then I'd go out and save it, so it was fine. But I just hated that. I'd be like, okay, just let me at them. They're beginning to forget that there's a real professional comedian coming. So, but that room, that's the thing. Places I work, I tend to really destroy.
And then my last question. Are you there?
Yeah, sorry. Let me.
Oh no, I can still hear you. Oh, okay,
sorry, I had a phone call coming in. There was already.
Oh, no worries. And then my last question is, since you also teach comedy, can you tell which of your students are going to be successful or have a good chance in this industry, or do you think that's something someone can't predict?
No, sometimes yes. Sometimes it's very clear. Okay, this person, they're a lifer. They're going to be here. This person's meant to be a comedian. Other people, surprise you. I've seen a lot of ugly ducklings turn into swans. The reality is it's about stick-to-itiveness. Who's willing to stick with it? And I'm very honest with them about that. I'm like, this is going to be very hard. This is going to take a very long time, and most of you are going to quit. After a few years, you're going to be like, well, you know what? Okay, I'm not taking off in this. And you're going to quit. So, and I understand it, but you'd be surprised the ones that stick, and you'd be surprised the ones that drop out, that have talent and have ability. And you're like, okay, you're going to be a lifer. And then they just quit like a year later. Like, all right, well, I guess not. So it is really, you can see who's got the ability, but that doesn't necessarily mean they've got the determination. And at the end of the day, and there are people that have less ability, but tremendous determination. And there's at the end of the day, determination in stand-up becomes more important than talent.
Yeah. Is that why you
just look at you.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Well, see, you and I don't always see eye and eye, but I consider you a friend, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
And then, I think comedy, there's a brotherhood regardless. So I think we'll always be family and you'll always be coworkers, you know what I mean? That's how I think.
Well, I think so. And, I mean, with someone like you, I mean, your pure determination, you're very good now, I mean, you really worked at and worked at and worked at it and got better and better and better. And that's just the way it goes. So, I mean, what my opinion may have been or is irrelevant.
Yeah.
You did the work.
Well, Greg, I want to respect your time and we got to go. Where can the folks follow you and support you on social media?
So the main thing is Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at Greg Romero Wilson. I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, but let's be honest, you got to pick one horse that you pay more attention to than the rest. So that's the one. Yeah, I know. I don't even do TikTok because I'm like, again, another.
You would be great at TikTok, though.
I know, but I skipped Snapchat. And I consider that one of the great achievements of my career. And so now it's like, do I have to do TikTok? I guess I should, but I again, it's one of those things. I didn't get into stand up to do social media.
Right.
If I could, I would just blow it all up. So,
right.
But eventually we'll get there. I'll get on TikTok right when it falls apart, right when nobody cares about it anymore. I'll be like, and that's the way I am with everything. I get to the party late, everything. I'm like, I'm here, guys. They're like, great, we were just closing down. That's what's left of this. There's what's left of the catering, and I think there's one beer left behind the bar. We'll see you later. So I always.
Well, you just sent me a friend request on MySpace, so.
Yeah, listen, I'm still very active on MySpace.
Greg, I love you, buddy. It's fun talking to you.
Important. Good talking to you too, my man.
All right, I'll talk to you later, buddy. Bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, that was the Greg Wilson. Follow him, subscribe, rate, review to the show, and all right, that was awesome. Have a good day, guys. Bye.
You're listening to Reza Riffs with Keith Reza and Alan Lee, right here on LA Talk Radio.